The LA Clippers may have the most bleak future in the entire NBA. Welcome in or welcome back. Unfortunately, the wheel has decided for day 5 we need to talk about the Los Angeles Clippers. And boy, do I not envy this team at all. And that's not even necessarily coming from someone who is as fortunate as I am to be a Celtics fan. But just as a basketball fan in general, I don't necessarily like it when teams struggle or are going to struggle or have historically struggled. And and the Clippers kind of fit all three of those categories. So the only way that I can actually describe this situation that the Clippers are in currently is to call it a disaster. You decided to attempt a big four with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard. And on paper, it looked good. Like the idea of all four of those SoCal guys coming to LA to win a championship looked so good. And for a while, it looked like you had enough depth and enough role players to supplement all of those things. You had Russell Westbrook, a former MVP, willing to come off of the bench and take a lesser role for the greater good. That is so rare. And the fact that the Clippers did not capitalize on it is so unfortunate. So you squander a bench role Russ. Then you piss off Paul George, who I will agree is not as good of a player as Kawhi Leonard is, but he was the most consistent one there. He was the one that played the most games between the two, and he was the guy for a lot of that, especially when Kawhi was out. Even when Kawhi was coming back, there were a lot of games where you looked at a box score, you watched the entire game, where you looked at it and went, Paul George is the guy. He's the best player on the floor right now. But you didn't want to play ball with him. Now, there are two sides to the story. Obviously, he wanted some money. He wanted to take less responsibility. The Clippers didn't want to do that. That's all well and good. But he's no longer there. He left. He's in Philadelphia now. So now what you're left with is no bench Russ, no very good Paul George, the shell of James Harden, and whatever's left of Kawhi Leonard. And I want to put it out there right now. James Harden is undeniably, historically speaking, one of the greatest offensive threats in NBA history. I mean, we're talking up there with Wilt Chamberlain on being unstoppable, unguardable, that good. He just isn't that same guy anymore. When he went to Philadelphia, you kind of saw him become more of a playmaker. He excelled in that pick and roll, pick and pop area. He was able to lead the floor. He was able to be a floor general. And when he came to LA, I kind of expected more of that, but for some reason, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George both looked at James Harden and said, you need to be James Harden and we'll adjust. I'm not sure that that was the right move. I wasn't positive of that at the time, and retrospectively, I still don't think it was the right move. Because you have to think, again, Paul George was the most consistent one there. He obviously dealt with some of his own injury problems, but if Kawhi wasn't there, Paul George was good for 25, 5, and 5 a night. You can't just find some of those guys in the league. Those are rare to find. So if you don't have that undisputed guy, and your other undisputed guy is in and out with injury, you're expecting this not prime, this over-the-hill James Harden to be your engine, and I'm not sure that that was ever a very good game plan. And I also don't want that statement to seem like I am shitting on the coaching because I love Ty Lue, and I don't even want to shit on the management because I love Steve Ballmer. I think that when you have an opportunity to bring those caliber of players in, you do whatever you can. Think about what he had to do to get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. You had to give up SGA and all those draft picks, and that looks like a very bad trade. But at the time, you do that trade 100 times out of 100. And it's the same situation here. You have two very good players, two top 25 players in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard when they are healthy. How do you add on to that? You could get James Harden. You could get Russell Westbrook, and that makes sense on paper. It just didn't work out for them. But we can't focus on the past. We have to focus on the current. The current is not so great either. Because of all these wheeling and dealings and all these trades that the Clippers have made, they don't have their own first-round draft pick, at least until 2031. They have one pick, I believe, in 2028 that is unprotected, but it's from the 76ers, who would have to imagine, because of the ascension of Tyrese Maxey, and we don't know what Joel Embiid is going to look like in 4 years, but if he is 80% of what he is right now, still a very good player, I'd have to imagine that draft pick is probably going to be in the 20s, so it's not going to get you an undeniable superstar. So I just don't see a way out for the Clippers other than to grit your teeth and just hope that something goes right for you. Because as it stands right now, the Clippers very well may miss the playoffs entirely. The West is so good. The West consistently and historically has been very, very good. But, I mean, we're looking at some of these teams here that they definitely aren't going to beat. The Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Grizzlies, the Suns, the Lakers. The Pelicans may make a run with that DeJounte Murray trade. Like, there are so much talent in the league and there's so much talent in the West that I just don't see a real scenario where they make the playoffs. Best case scenario, I think they're the 10th seed in the West and they compete for a play-in spot. But that's it. I don't see that team being any higher than what it is. I think a lot of this just comes down to really unfortunate timing for the Clippers because you have that new stadium that you obviously want to fill up for the home games. You want to bring in revenue to be able to pay for that kind of expansion, that kind of remodeling for that stadium. And you just don't have the star power because not only do you have to have your GM hat on, where you're the owner of the team, you have to have your business hat on. The business part of you wants to put asses in seats. You want to pack the house every time, and how do you do that? You put on a competitive roster. You can't do that anymore because you have leveraged all of your draft capital away, and the only players that you have on your team are, again, the shell of James Harden and whatever's left of Kawhi Leonard. If I'm the GM, if I'm calling the shots, I have to take a very serious look at the end of this season and see if there is any sort of market for James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. And honestly, you probably do it before then. You probably do it at the trade deadline because this draft has Cooper Flagg in it. Cooper is obviously probably not like a generational talent like the moniker would imply. Not a Victor Wembanyama, not a Zion, not an Anthony Davis or LeBron James. But Cooper Flagg is going to be the real deal. You saw his USA camp, his select team spots. He was scoring on Anthony Davis. He was making the right reads. That was my biggest concern about him coming into the league. Obviously, he still has a year left to play at Duke, and he's going to work out some of the kinks there. But I was really concerned about how his offensive game would translate. And if we're just looking at the tape, it seems fine. His defense was always going to be his calling card, but his offensive game looks really polished right now. So if the Clippers are going to be bad, if they're limping into the All-Star break, 10 games under 500, I think you have to take a really serious look at pulling the plug and just getting whatever you can for what's left of your team. And I don't just mean Kawhi and James Harden. I mean getting rid of everything. Everyone that doesn't have some sort of, like if you have some sort of value, you have to go. And what I would do, because I always do this when I play 2K, I would trade everyone on the team to get as many draft capital assets back while also acquiring expiring contracts to just start fresh. Because that's obviously not very realistic. But if you could do that, you could look at the next wave of free agents and go, well, they may want to leave. And if I have no money on my books, I could give them so much money that they couldn't say no. So I think Steve Ballmer's going to have one hell of a time deciphering what he needs to do with his team over the next year and especially over the next 5 or so years as far as the future is concerned. But as far as the 2024-2025 season is concerned, I don't think that the Clippers have much to look forward to. How bad do you think the Clippers are going to be? Let me know down in the comments. Check my link tree while you're down there. Keep up with me on TikTok and Instagram and all the other things. Be kind. Tell somebody you love them. I'll see you tomorrow.